It was a quiet morning in Washington, D.C., but inside the hearing room of the Capitol, hundreds of cameras flashed. The congressional oversight hearing was scheduled to begin at 9 a.m. Most people expected a routine session, another formal discussion between Congress and the judiciary. But this day was going to be different. Chief Justice John Roberts, dressed in a dark suit instead of his usual court robes, walked into the room with calm authority. He smiled slightly as he took his seat before the Judiciary Committee. Journalists whispered among themselves. Roberts was one of the most powerful legal figures in the country. His presence was always serious. Across from him sat a young woman with sharp eyes and a calm expression. Representative Jasmine Crockett. She was new to Washington politics, but she had already earned a reputation for asking hard questions. Many people in the room barely noticed her. Some reporters even joked that she wouldn't dare challenge someone like Roberts. The chairman opened the session. After a few basic statements, it was time for questions. Roberts leaned forward with confidence. The judiciary, he began, must remain independent. We must not allow political pressure to damage the legal system. This trend of turning judges into political targets is dangerous. Populist interference in our courts threatens democracy. People nodded. Cameras zoomed in. Roberts spoke like a teacher. His voice was calm but firm. Then it was Jasmine's turn. She leaned into the microphone. Chief Justice Roberts, thank you for your words. I agree that the judiciary should be free from political pressure. But I have questions about some of your recent meetings. Roberts raised an eyebrow. Jasmine continued. Are you aware that your private dinners with executives from Red Star Defense Group and representatives from the Foreign Embassy of Carvania have raised concerns about judicial impartiality? There was silence. The chairman looked confused. One senator leaned closer. Roberts smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. Representative Crockett, with all due respect, I don't believe this is the proper forum for rumors and tabloid politics. There were a few chuckles in the room. Few lawmakers smiled as if Jasmine had made a beginner's mistake. But she didn't back down. I have here, she said, lifting a file, a calendar record that shows 3 meetings in the last 5 months. All were off the official schedule. At one of them, the CEO of Red Star was also present. She handed copies to the committee members. Robert's face changed. The smile faded. His jaw tightened. This is not a courtroom representative. He said coldly. It is highly inappropriate to accuse a sitting Chief Justice of misconduct without proper evidence. I agree, Jasmine replied calmly. Which is why I brought more. She pulled out a second document, a legal memo signed by a federal appeals judge who had recused himself from a weapons contract case, citing conflicts of interest at higher levels of the judiciary. Gasps were heard around the room. The chairman asked for a short recess, but Jasmine spoke again before the gavel came down. I'm not finished, she said. People deserve to know how decisions are made. When billion-dollar contracts and foreign alliances are affected by court rulings, the public has a right to transparency. Roberts didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the documents. His fingers tapped the table slowly, then faster. Within minutes, clips from the hearing were trending online. Who is Jasmine Crockett? Read the headline on a popular news site. Congresswoman confronts Chief Justice, sparks legal firestorm. Judiciary under pressure after explosive hearing. Social media exploded with videos of Jasmine calmly delivering her statements, and of Roberts looking, for the first time in years, unsure. Some called her brave. Others called her reckless. Reporters surrounded her outside the chamber, shouting questions. Do you believe Chief Justice Roberts is corrupt? Where did you get those documents? Are you afraid of backlash? She paused at the steps, turned toward the cameras, and said, I respect the law. But the law must also respect the people. If someone as powerful as the Chief Justice thinks he is beyond questions, then we have a bigger problem than I thought. Cross town, inside a glass office on the 14th floor, Senator Helen Marks watched the news in silence. She picked up her phone and made a call. "She's going to be a problem," she said. "Take care of it." Back at the Capitol, Jasmine returned to her office. She closed the door behind her and sat down, breathing deeply. She reached into her bag and pulled out a USB drive. It was marked only with a small red sticker. She stared at it for a long time. She hadn't used it yet. Not today, but she might need it soon. The hearing had ended. But the storm had just begun. The country was buzzing. Major news networks played the clip of Jasmine Crockett confronting Chief Justice Roberts again and again. Headlines speculated, commentators debated. Social media was on fire. But in a quiet cafe just outside the Capitol, Jasmine sat across from a man few recognized, but many depended on, Isaac Nazar, investigative journalist and her closest ally in this fight. "You are brilliant," Isaac said, sliding a folder across the table, but that was just the start. Jasmine opened the folder. Inside were printouts of financial documents, emails, and meeting logs. Red Star Defense, Carvania Embassy, legal lobbying firms, everything they had gathered over the past 3 months. "These prove the meetings weren't casual," Isaac said. "They were coordinated." There was pressure from both the Carvanian government and Red Star to sway court opinion on export licensing laws. If Roberts was involved, Jasmine didn't look up. It would mean the Chief Justice of the United States helped legalize foreign weapons contracts by quietly shaping judicial opinion. "Exactly," Isaac whispered. "And we have the first half of the trail." Jasmine's fingers tightened around her coffee cup. "Not enough for prosecution," she said, "but enough to raise the alarm." Back in her office later that afternoon, Jasmine studied the documents again. She thought about her father, a once famous civil rights lawyer who was disbarred 20 years ago after taking on a federal judge accused of bribery. She was just a child then. But she still remembered the reporters outside their house, the death threats, the court ruling that destroyed him. He had died with a ruined name and no apology. And now she was standing at the edge of this same fire. Her phone rang. It was a news anchor from WBN America, inviting her for a live interview that evening. She hesitated, then accepted. Meanwhile, across town, Senator Helen Marks stood before a group of donors behind closed doors. "She's dangerous," Marks said. "Too smart, too bold, and too willing to take risks. She's not playing politics, she's playing chess." And she just cornered a king. A man in a gray suit spoke. "We can leak something on her. She has family history, her father's disbarment, maybe even past client records." "Do it," Mark said coldly. "Let her feel the cost of ambition." That night on live television, Jasmine sat in the studio under bright lights. The anchor, Dana Voss, leaned forward. "Congresswoman Crockett, the footage of your exchange with Chief Justice Roberts has gone viral. Many are calling it a bold move. Others say it's political theater. What do you say?" Jasmine looked directly into the camera. "I say this is not about theater. It's about truth. If a judge is meeting privately with defense lobbyists and foreign agents, we must ask why. And if those meetings affect legal decisions, then the American people deserve to know." Dana nodded. "Some say you're targeting the judiciary for personal political gain." "I don't want power," Jasmine said softly. "I want accountability. I want my son to grow up in a country where laws aren't shaped in secret." The interview ended with applause in the studio. But as Jasmine left, a reporter approached her. "Congresswoman, is it true your father was once disbarred for accusing a federal judge of corruption? Are you continuing his personal vendetta?" She paused. The question stung. Not because it was unfair, but because it was true. "I'm continuing what he started," she said. "It's justice, not revenge." The next morning, a new headline hit every major platform. "Crockett's hidden past, family tied to judicial scandal." It was a hit piece. Anonymous sources, old court transcripts, selective quotes, photos of her father in court. On the same morning, Jasmine received a plain envelope at her office. Inside was a single typed sentence. "You're walking the same path." He didn't survive it either. She locked the office door, sat at her desk, and stared at the USB drive again. There was more on its Tadio files, names, even emails directly implicating several senior legal figures. She had held it back. She wasn't ready to drop it yet. But the game was changing. Her phone buzzed. "Isaac again. Red Star just filed a legal complaint against you for defamation," he said. "Senator Marks is backing them. This is coordinated." Jasmine nodded slowly. "Let them come." She opened her laptop and began writing her next set of questions for the upcoming hearing. In the background, a breaking news alert popped on the screen. Justice Roberts issues rare statement. "I will not be intimidated." Jasmine's eyes narrowed. She whispered to herself, "Neither will I." The next week unfolded like a political hurricane in every corner of Washington. Power brokers whispered Jasmine Crockett's name, some with respect, others with fear. She had crossed a line few dared to touch, and the system was pushing back. Inside the White House, President Elias Monroe watched Jasmine's interview for the third time. "She's good," he murmured. As Chief of Staff David Lynn didn't smile. "She's also dangerous. She keeps pulling at this thread. It won't stop with the judiciary. She's already hinting at defense contracts. Foreign influence. That leads here." The president nodded slowly. "Get her in here quietly." 2 hours later, Jasmine was escorted into the Oval Office. The room was still, the air tense. Monroe, calm but deliberate, motioned for her to sit. "I respect your courage, Congresswoman," he began, "but I want to offer you some advice, friendly, off the record." Jasmine sat tall. "I'm listening." "There are some battles worth fighting," Monroe said, "and some that burn everything around them, including the people who started them." She didn't flinch. "You're asking me to stop?" "No. I'm asking you to think about the cost. It's for you, for your party, for national unity." Jasmine leaned forward. "With all due respect, Mr. President, the cost of silence is higher." There was a long pause. Monroe gave a tired smile. "You remind me of myself. Before I got elected, that night, Senator Helen Marks took her fight public at a press conference filled with donors and press. She stood before cameras and said, 'What we are witnessing is not justice. It's a carefully planned political smear campaign. Congresswoman, Crockett is exploiting her position to damage the integrity of our institutions.' Journalists shouted questions. 'Do you deny the foreign meetings took place? Is there a conflict of interest in Red Star contracts?' Marks sidestepped it all. It's biz politics, nothing more." But behind the scenes, she was working harder. She activated a network of legal consultants and loyal staffers, telling them to dig deep. They began pulling Jasmine's old court cases, looking for clients with grudges, statements taken out of context. A strategy designed to bury her in doubt. Meanwhile, Isaac Nasser followed a different path. He had tracked down a shell corporation, Argonne Group LLC, registered in Delaware, linked to Red Star's offshore assets, through encrypted emails and late-night calls. He contacted a source in Brussels, an international financial analyst, who had traced Argonne's funds to a lobbying deal that reached all the way back to Carvania State Security Agency. "This isn't just about defense contracts," the analyst said. "This is foreign manipulation of U.S. court policy. And they're doing it legally." Back in D.C., Jasmine appeared again on national TV, this time on a tough, conservative-leaning talk show. The host leaned in. "Congresswoman, critics say your father was disbarred for violating judicial procedure and that you're using this investigation to restore his name. Is this personal?" Jasmine stayed calm. "My father believed in the law. He lost everything because he tried to expose a lie. That story shaped me. But this," she held up a thick file of evidence, "this is not about him. It's about—" Now, the host tried to interrupt, but she continued, her voice rising. "When the Chief Justice meets secretly with lobbyists who profit from foreign wars, And when defense companies fund think tanks that write legal opinions, that's not just unethically dangerous. The host shifted nervously. You're saying there's corruption in the Supreme Court? I'm saying there's influence, and we've ignored it for too long. The interview exploded online. Within hours, supporters and critics clashed across media. Some called Jasmine a hero. Others demanded she be removed from the committee. The pressure was working. Jasmine's staff began to feel it. 2 aides received threatening messages. A former client accused her of misrepresenting a plea deal. Talk of a disciplinary review began to circle. Then, one evening, Jasmine received a text from Isaac. We got it. Not just meetings, payments. Red Star transferred money to a law foundation run by a sitting appellate judge. Guess who sits on its board? She replied, Don't tell me, Roberts. Bingo. Jasmine closed her laptop. She walked to the window of her apartment and stared out into the city lights. She was exhausted. Her name was being dragged through the mud. Her career was hanging by a thread. But now she had something: real money trails, board connections, and international ties. But with each move forward, the stakes rose. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. She opened it to find a plain manila envelope on the ground. No one in sight. Inside was a single photograph, her 10-year-old son, at school from a distance, and one handwritten message, Back off. Jasmine sat down, breath shaking. She held the photo tightly, staring at it for a long time. Then she opened her desk drawer, pulled out the USB drive again, and placed it on the table. She whispered, No more warnings. The war had begun. The threats were no longer subtle. Photograph of her son at school sent as a warning. Jasmine Crockett had entered a different level of danger now, and she knew it. The following morning, she didn't go to the Capitol. Instead, she sat in her kitchen, phone in one hand, coffee untouched, staring at the USB drive on the table. She had guarded it for weeks. It contained audio files, message logs, names, travel records, all tied to Red Star Defense, foreign actors, and high-ranking U.S. legal officials. She knew once she released it, there was no turning back. Her phone buzzed. It was Isaac. Did you get the envelope too? He asked. Jasmine's eyes sharpened. You got one? A photo of my niece, same style. They're watching everyone now. She stood up, pacing. We've pushed too far. They're panicking. Isaac hesitated. We may only get one. Shot. We release too much and they'll claim it's stolen, hacked, unreliable. But if we do nothing, they'll bury it. Jasmine's voice was steady. Then we don't release it. Cue it live, on record. Later that day, she walked back into the Capitol for a scheduled committee session, wearing black. She had asked for 10 minutes to speak. The room was tense, every chair was full. Reporters waited outside. She was now both a national voice and a political target. She stood and faced the committee. I would like to speak not just as a member of Congress, she began, but as a citizen of this country. Her voice was calm but strong. We say we have checks and balances. What happens when all the power centers protect each other? What happens when judges sit with lobbyists in private homes while deciding cases tied to those same industries? Some members fidgeted. Others watched closely. I've spent the last 6 weeks tracing financial flows and meeting logs. I've confirmed that Red Star Defense, a private contractor with government ties, made large contributions to a law foundation linked to appellate judges. One of those judges later approved a contract affecting arms exports to Carvania. Gasps. Whispers. Reporters outside pressed against the glass. Jasmine continued. I have evidence that members of this judiciary, our highest legal authority, met in private with Carvania's state representatives. These meetings were undocumented, off-record, and hidden from oversight. Then she paused. Her eyes met the chairman's. I've also received threats, pictures of my child, messages left in silence. And still, I will not back down. The chairman tried to interrupt, but Jasmine raised the USB drive and placed it on the table. This contains documents, recordings, and financial statements. It connects defense companies, foreign governments, and members of our legal system. I'm requesting immediate public release through this committee." The room erupted. Voices shouted over each other. "Point of order. She can't introduce classified materials like that. This is political suicide." But Jasmine didn't move. Then the chairman's gavel slammed down. "Order. We will review this request in private." "No," Jasmine said. "Not in private. The people have waited too long for truth." Outside the building, news broke within minutes. Live feeds. Breaking banners. Images of Jasmine holding the USB drive flooded every screen. Across the world, in Carvania's capital, their foreign minister called for restraint and respect. For diplomatic norms. Back in Washington, President Monroe called an emergency cabinet meeting. "We've got two problems now," said the National Security Advisor. One Red Star stocks just dropped 12%. To Carvania is threatening to suspend military cooperation. Monroe rubbed his eyes. "What did I tell her?" "She's not stopping," Lynn replied. "We can't stop her without looking guilty." At home that night, Jasmine sat on the couch with her son. He played a video game. She watched him. Silently. He didn't know about the photograph. She hadn't told him. But she had never felt so afraid and so determined. Her phone buzzed. A message from Isaac. "Check your email. We found her." Attached was a grainy photo of a woman exiting a federal courthouse. Nia Samuels, a junior clerk in the Supreme Court. She had gone quiet 6 weeks ago. Rumors said she had resigned. Suddenly, no one knew why. But Isaac had found her. "She's the one who copied the internal calendar." His message continued. "She's your whistleblower. She's ready to talk." Jasmine leaned back in her chair, heart pounding. A whistleblower inside the Supreme Court. Suddenly, everything changed. This wasn't just politics. This was proof. Later that night, Jasmine met Isaac in a quiet parking garage. He handed her a tablet. On screen, Nia's face appeared, her voice shaky but clear. "I copied the records," she said. "They think I deleted everything, but I kept one drive." The days following Jasmine Crockett's explosive committee speech felt like a whirlwind, each one more intense than the last. The political storm had only intensified, and the media was relentless. Headlines ran nonstop and in every newsroom. Across the country, her name dominated the conversation. But Jasmine knew the worst was yet to come. Her office phone rang late one night. It was Isaac. "I've got confirmation," Isaac said, voice tight. "Nia Samuels is willing to testify. She's prepared to go public." Jasmine sat up, her mind racing. Or is she? "She's hiding out in a safe house. They're looking for her. The longer she waits, the more danger she's in. She's ready, but we need to move fast." Jasmine looked out the window of her office. The city was quiet, the Capitol's dome just visible in the distance. Everything felt fragile now. But this was it, the moment to finish what she had started. "I'll meet her tomorrow. Let's do this." The next day, a small group of reporters arrived at a secure location in downtown Washington. The cameras were set up. The team was ready. It was time for Nia Samuels, the young clerk who had once worked under Chief Justice Roberts, to step into the spotlight. The press conference began. Jasmine stood at the podium, Nia beside her. Nia's face was pale, but there was a look of resolve in her eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. I'd like to introduce Nia Samuels, a former clerk at the Supreme Court who has come forward with crucial evidence in the ongoing investigation into judicial corruption." The room was silent. Every reporter in the room knew this moment could change everything. Nia took a deep breath, then spoke. "I worked for the Supreme Court for 2 years. During that time, I witnessed things that made me question everything I believed in. I saw meetings between Chief Justice Roberts and executives from Red Star Defense. I saw documents linking foreign governments to major rulings in arms contracts. And I saw the money flowing through foundations and think tanks. These people weren't just deciding cases, they were making deals. The room was stunned. No one had expected this level of detail. Jasmine stood quietly as Naya continued. I'm not just here to talk about politics. I'm here because I want the truth to come out. I want to protect the integrity of the judicial system. But most of all, I want people to know that the system isn't as transparent as we're told. I know I could face serious consequences for this, but I couldn't stay silent any longer. The room erupted into a frenzy of questions. Journalists shouted, desperate for more details. What evidence do you have? Can you confirm that Roberts was directly involved? How did you get the documents? Naya nodded, her voice steady. I kept everything. Emails, calendars, meeting notes. It's all there. I've provided copies to Representative Crockett. They will be released to the public after this press conference. Jasmine raised her hand, signaling for calm. Ladies and gentlemen, I know this is a lot to take in, but these documents are irrefutable. The Chief Justice knew exactly what was happening, and he played a role in influencing court decisions for corporate interests and foreign governments. Naya's testimony hit the airwaves immediately. News outlets across the globe picked up the story, and soon it was the #1 topic on every major network. The public, already shaken by the initial revelations, was now faced with a torrent of new, undeniable evidence. But as the days passed, the pressure on Jasmine mounted. Back in Washington, the political establishment was mobilizing. Powerful allies of Roberts and Red Star quickly began spinning the narrative. They accused Nia of being a disgruntled former employee, a pawn in a political game orchestrated by Jasmine. A new round of attacks on Jasmine's credibility followed. Senator Helen Marks led the charge. Representative Crockett's entire campaign is built on lies, Marks declared during a televised interview. She's willing to tear apart the fabric of our legal system to gain power. This is nothing but a smear job against the most respected judicial leader in this country. But it wasn't just political figures making moves. Behind closed doors, there were whispers of something darker. Sources close to the administration warned that the pressure on Jasmine would only escalate. Her life, her career, her family, all of it was at risk. In private moments, Jasmine was forced to confront the reality of what she had started. Her phone rang late one night. It was a message from the head of her security detail. They've found her. Nia's been taken. Jasmine froze, her heart pounding. What do you mean, taken? They kidnapped her. We're doing everything we can to track her, but they're moving fast. Get ready to go public. This is bigger than you think. Nia, the brave young woman who had risked everything for the truth. Jasmine stood up, pacing around her apartment. Every step felt heavier now. The threats had gone from personal to real, and they were going after Naya because she was the key to everything. She had a decision to make. They couldn't stop now. She couldn't back down. Her mind raced. There was one last play she could make. The final release of the evidence. She grabbed the USB drive from her desk and held it in her hands, considering the weight of it. The whole system had tried to bury the truth, but it was time for them to face the consequences. She sent a single text to Isaac. Release everything now. The files, the recordings, the proof, everything went live. The world was watching. It was a gamble that would change everything the next morning. The headlines hit. Explosive leaked documents showed Chief Justice's involvement in major corruption scheme, Supreme Court scandal, judicial system under siege, and in the midst of it all, Jasmine Crockett stood at the center of the storm. The fight had only just begun, and there was no turning back. But in her heart, she knew one thing for sure. The truth would never be silenced again. The leak shattered everything within hours of Jasmine Crockett's order. The internet erupted. Documents, videos, recordings, uploaded, verified, and analyzed in real time. Newsrooms scrambled to understand the scale of what they were seeing. Okay? And by dawn, it was clear the scandal went far beyond one judge. There were offshore payments, From Red Star Defense, travel logs linking Chief Justice Roberts' two secretive meetings in Switzerland and Dubai, a think tank the American Legal Future Institute was exposed as a front for laundering foreign funds through scholarship grants. A private recording showed Roberts speaking with Senator Marks and a Carvanian diplomat. The audio was unmistakable. Roberts' voice, "It'll pass. We control the court. The media won't touch it if we keep it framed as constitutional." It was the proof Jasmine had feared and hoped would surface. Her gamble had worked. But the consequences hit faster than she could prepare for. Within 12 hours, Roberts canceled all public appearances. The Supreme Court issued a rare midnight statement, denying the claims but announcing a temporary internal review of judicial conduct. That hadn't happened in over 70 years. The president, under mounting pressure, broke his silence, standing before cameras at the White House. Monroe tried to calm the nation. "We are watching these revelations with grave concern," he said. "We believe in the rule of law and we will ensure transparency at every level." A formal inquiry has begun. But Jasmine wasn't satisfied. She stood on the Capitol steps later that same day, addressing a sea of cameras and microphones. "This isn't just about one man," she said, her voice clear and calm. "This is about a system that believed it could act without consequences. This is about foreign governments buying access to our courts. This is about corruption disguised as tradition." She called for a full public trial, not behind closed doors, not in some quiet backroom committee, but in front of the American people. The media couldn't get enough. Every major network shifted to 24/7 coverage. Protests erupted outside the Supreme Court and on campuses nationwide. Some chanted her name, others warned of a judicial coup. And in Carvania, her government issued an angry response, claiming the U.S. was attempting to export instability under the guise of legal ethics. Tensions rose fast. The U.S. ambassador was recalled from Carvania. Military cooperation talks were suspended. The defense industry lost billions overnight. Inside a secure government building, Spen met with a classified panel to discuss next steps. The Department of Justice was split. Half wanted to delay any legal motion against Roberts, citing national security and diplomatic fallout. The other half wanted immediate arrest. She sat across from Monroe again this time, surrounded by advisors and legal counsel. "We've triggered something global," Monroe said. "You've pulled on a wire that stretches into our foreign policy, defense structure, and legal norms. Are you prepared for what happens next?" Jasmine didn't hesitate. "I didn't cause the rot. I just exposed it. And if the entire legal order begins to collapse, then maybe," she said, "it's time to rebuild it." That evening, Isaac called with an update on Naya. "She's safe. They failed to get her out of the city. The FBI moved her to protective custody. She's scared, but she wants to speak. She's willing to testify live." Jasmine smiled for the first time in days. "Set it up," she said. "This time, we make them listen." 2 days later, Jasmine returned to Congress. She walked into a special session, this one broadcast live to the entire nation. Not as an accuser, not as a protester, but as the leader of an inquiry that had shaken the very bones of the government. The hearing began. Jasmine called her witness. Nia Samuels walked slowly to the table, sat down, and faced the microphone. Rain fell softly over Washington, D.C. The Capitol dome was half covered in morning mist, and the crowds outside had thinned. The resignation of Chief Justice John Roberts had sent shockwaves through the country, and now the political world was holding its breath. Inside her office, Jasmine Crockett sat alone. No cameras, no advisors, just silence. On her desk were two things: a printed resignation letter from Roberts and the last draft of a bill she had been working on since the scandal began. The Judicial Transparency and Accountability Act, a proposal to enforce public disclosures, financial audits, and strict foreign contact rules for all federal judges. Outside her door, reporters waited for a statement. Inside, Jasmine was still deciding what came next. A knock. Isaac Nasser stepped in, holding a tablet. His eyes were tired, but his smile carried relief. "It's done," he said. "The networks confirmed it. Roberts is gone. Marks is stepping down later today, and Red Star, half their board, just resigned. Their stock is crashing." Jasmine gave a faint smile, and Carvania. Isaac shrugged. "They've called the U.S. unstable and announced they're reviewing all defense ties. But they're bluffing. They need American contracts more than we need their diplomacy." She looked out the window. "I didn't want this to break the world." "You didn't break it," he said. "You exposed what was already cracked." By midday, Jasmine stood before the press. Microphones lined up like weapons. Cameras rolled. Her face was calm, but her voice carried steel. "This fight was never about one judge," she said. "It was about the wall of secrecy that allowed the law to be bent by power. This isn't the end. It's a beginning. We now move forward with reforms that are long overdue. Judges will no longer rule in the shadows. The people will no longer be shut out of justice." Reporters shouted questions. "What's next for you, Congresswoman? Will you run for higher office? Do you feel vindicated?" She paused. "No, I feel responsible. We didn't just prove corruption. We revealed a system willing to protect itself over its citizens. That's a responsibility I won't forget." That evening, in a symbolic act, President Monroe signed the Judicial Transparency Act into law in front of live cameras. Jasmine stood behind him, flanked by Nia Samuels and Isaac. It was a quiet moment. No fireworks, no parades, but the weight of it felt historic. Later, in a televised town hall, Jasmine sat across from veteran journalist Laura Trent. The set was simple: a desk, 2 chairs, and a dark blue backdrop. Laura asked, "Did you ever consider walking away?" "Yes," Jasmine said, honestly, "every day. When they sent pictures of my son, when they tried to erase my father's name again, when I saw how deep it went, I almost broke." Laura leaned in. "So why didn't you?" Jasmine's voice was soft. "Because the truth matters, even when it's dangerous, especially then." The interview aired in 14 countries. Translations were requested in 3 languages. Foreign ministers gave statements. International courts debated adopting similar reforms. And back home, things slowly began to shift. Judges began publicly disclosing their investments. Defense companies pulled their sponsorships from legal think tanks. A second inquiry began, this time into foreign lobbying in Congress itself. As for Senator Helen Marks, she resigned 2 days later, citing a need to reflect. She gave no apology. Chief Justice Roberts returned to private life. He released a memoir months later, denying intentional wrongdoing but admitting misjudgments. In perception, it sold well, but few read it. And Jasmine, she didn't run for Senate. She didn't accept a media job or publish a book. Instead, one quiet Saturday, she drove 2 hours outside D.C. and stood before an old locked door. The office had been empty for 20 years. Her father's law practice, dusty glass, faded lettering, a symbol of what power had stolen. She took out a new key. The lock clicked. Inside, it smelled of age and memory. Faded files, broken furniture. But sunlight streamed through the window like hope. She walked to the center of the room and stood still, not as a politician, not as a symbol, but as a daughter reclaiming what had been lost. She placed a new nameplate on the desk: Crockett. Legal Initiative Justice has no expiration date. As she sat down, her phone buzzed. A message from Isaac. They're calling it a movement now. She smiled faintly and typed back, "Let them, but we'll call it a reminder." A reminder that power can be challenged, that truth can survive darkness. That one voice, when it refuses to be silenced, can echo through the walls of power until the system remembers what justice is supposed to be. And this time, it remembered.